Hi everyone, welcome to the new episode of Yolosaurus Goes All In. Today we are going to be covering software usage, and the most important software you would need to know is your poker tracking software. In this case, we are going to be covering Holdem Manager 2 as it is the most popular software out there, if I'm not wrong, and the other popular option is Poker Tracker 4, but we are not going to be covering it. Both software are fairly similar, and currently both are owned by the same owner, the same company, so I think there should be a lot of similarities. Holdem Manager 2 is a really powerful tool, and today we will just briefly cover some more advanced options. So firstly, we are going to be reviewing some statistics. So it's generally what a coach would do for a student during the first coaching session. So hopefully we can try to do that here. Secondly, we are going to be um, combining a few regulars at NL2 to see how the general population plays at this limit. So after that, we will try to analyze the stats of that combined group of players and see if there are any specific tendencies that we can possibly try to exploit. And lastly, we are going to be we are going to be creating a new HUD from scratch. So hopefully we can learn to use this software better. Okay, so right now we have your basic stats here. Okay, so how do we make this come out? Generally, you want to be clicking on more reports. So more reports, and then you can either select your hands by sticks if you are playing differently at different limits. But in this case, I think we want to be looking at your overall stats, so just click on overall. Okay, so what it will show is your total hands, net won USD win rate, and some basic stats like VPIP, PFR, 3-bet when the showdown, when $1 at showdown, aggression. So all these are pretty basic stats and they're quite general. So I think we want to be adding a lot more specific stats to spot for specific leagues. So based on what I see so far, you are on the tighter side, which I think is perfectly fine for a beginner. 3-bet is really low. Is that really optimal? I think having it slightly higher is probably better. Maybe like 5 to 6% for now because we don't get overly aggressive. When to show down 25%, I think it's fine. Yeah, people do not bluff all that much, and yeah, so I think it's okay. If it's a bit higher, it's also fine. This stat should be close to 50. If it's too low, it means you're not bluffing enough. If it's too high, it means you might be too aggressive. So 50 is like a number where you're kind of well balanced. Aggression and aggression frequency, I generally tend to use aggression, but aggression frequency is more accurate, I guess. So about 2.5 and 35% is pretty fine. Yeah. Okay, but this doesn't tell us the whole story. So let's right click this, click on report statistics. Yeah, so we want to be adding a lot more stats. So this is what you should be doing. Firstly, we want to be looking at fold to 3-bet. So you can just type it in the search bar. So it's under pre-flop for the 3-bet. So it's sorted according to alphabetical order. So then we add 4-bet. So it's the same pre-flop 4-bet, 4-bet range. I generally use 4-bet range. Later I'll explain it. Pre-flop 4-bet, fold to 4-bet, 5-bet. Okay, so those are the basic pre-flop stats. We can also add like positioner opening range stats, so I guess we should add that. Steel, so we can have like raise first. I think it's raise first. Okay, open raise. Okay, so we can add. So I think people at lower limits, they tend to use the steel stat, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so generally if you have a larger sample size, I would prefer to use like a positioner open raise stat. So like cut off steel, small blind steel, button steel is a lot more accurate and makes more sense. But your sample size on all your opponents is at the very most like 2,000 hands. So you might need to use a more generous set, yeah, to make up for the lack of sample. So we add the early unopened preflop raise as well, and we add the EP MPE unopened preflop raise. I'm not sure why it's not there. Okay, MP raise was in, yeah, that's the same. Yeah, okay, I think we are done with pre-flop. Next is post-flop stats. Flop c-bet, turn c-bet, river c-bet, and versus c-bet on each street, the stats for those. Those are the most important. I find those to be a lot more important than, say, the like aggression factor. That's more important for fish.
Yeah.
But against the regular, you want to be using like fold to c-bet instead. So okay, we can go to continuation bet here. So like flop c-bet, turn c-bet, river c-bet. If you want to be more specific, you can add in position, out of position. But for now, I think your c-betting strategy for IP and OOP should be fairly similar. As you go higher, then you might want to start checking and slow playing more hands out of position.
Yeah.
So your c-bet out of position should be lower in that case. But let's not go into that for now. Versus c-bet, as we said earlier. So flop fold to c-bet, river fold to c-bet. Yeah, I should just try to add everything here. Flop raise c-bet. So if you want to get a flop call versus c-bet, you just take 100 minus both. I guess I should just add everything in. Flop call. Do you see it? Flop call
Yeah.
c-bet. Yeah. And then turn call c-bet, turn raise versus c-bet. And turn fold c-bet. And of course you add the same thing for the river. River fold to c-bet, river. Okay, I guess river, like river call, river raise, those stats tend to have really low sample size, so it might not be that important. I'll just add it in anyway. So generally you wouldn't have a sample for the river. Even for the turn, you will rarely have a good sample. But like on the earlier streets, you will tend to have a larger sample size because those streets happen more frequently. So yeah, those will tend to be more accurate. Okay, so these are the most important. We can also look at aggression factor, I guess, but
Oh, went to
it's
showdown.
not so important.
Oh, we have went to
Yeah,
showdown.
that you have it at 24. So I guess these are all the fundamental stats.
So Holdem Manager sort of aggregates your overall.
Yeah, your overall stats. Okay, so let's start talking about specific numbers now. Versus 3-bet fold percentage. In a high stakes game, your 4 to 3-bet should be 45 to 55. I think that's reasonable. But this is micro stakes where most players play pretty similarly to you. Their overall 3-bet percentage is like 3 to 4%. So when people are 3-betting you really tight, it makes no sense to call or continue against a 3-bet with a wide range. So folding a lot is correct. I like it. So 65% is fine. Like if it's 70%, it might even be fine because folding a lot is good when your opponents are just not bluffing you, right?
Yeah. As often as you would like, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So hands like 10-9 suited, you can't really call them profitably when your opponents are just three betting jacks plus and ace king. It's just a big losing play when your opponents are going to have an overpair most of the time, and at best you can flop a draw and you will usually miss most of the time. Okay, so next is your 4-bet. So 4-bet refers to how often you are 4-betting when faced with a 3-bet. So this 10% here means that you are 4-betting 10% of your opening range. So if let's say you are in the button, you're opening 50%. If you are 4-betting 10% of that, then your 4-bet range is 5% of hands. Yeah. So 4-bet range is the actual range itself. So like a 2%, 2.3% range could be something like queens plus and ace king. So you might be 4-betting something like that. Or maybe you might be 4-betting kings plus, which is 0.9%, and maybe some other bluffs. But I don't really think you are.
So not bluffing that much when I'm 4-betting. Is that what it's trying to say?
No, this just refers to your overall 4-betting range. So we do not know whether it's a balanced range or it's purely for value,
Yeah.
because it's mostly reflected in the 4 versus 5-bet. Okay, I guess we should add that in as well. Your 4-bet range is
2.33%.
2.3%.
Yeah.
And your fold to 5-bet is 23%, which means that if we assume that you are never folding to a 5-bet, if you have a value 4-bet hand, and you are only folding to a 5-bet when you are 4-bet bluffing, it means that you have about 3 value combos for every 1 bluff combo. Is that right? So right over here, you are folding 23% of the time against a 5-bet, which probably means that 23% of your 4-betting range is a bluff, right?
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess you are still 4-bet bluffing some of the time, right?
Yes. Sometimes.
Okay, so I think having generally your fold to 4-bet should be okay. Your fold to 4-bet here in this case is 35%, which means that 2/3 of your range is value when you 3-bet, and a third of your range is bluffs, right?
Yeah.
Because assuming that you are never folding to a 4-bet when you are 3-betting something for value.
I actually, so for example, if I 3-bet for value ace king, I'll
Yeah.
fold them sometimes when I face with a 4-bet. So those I fall to, even though they are value hands.
Okay. Yeah. So it really depends. Like I try to avoid getting myself in those spots where I 3-bet something for value and fold to a 4-bet. But of course, there are specific instances where you have a lot of value by 3-betting in particular hand, but that guy is just so tight and he is not 4-bet bluffing at all. So if you 3-bet ace king and you think your opponent will call ace jack, king queen, ace queen, then it's great. But if your opponent only 4-bets kings plus, then
Yeah.
you should definitely be folding queens and ace king. So I guess the numbers don't really tell the entire picture of where, in terms of your range composition, but it's pretty close, I think. So in this case, 4 to 4-bet, generally speaking, should be around 50%, 40, okay, 35 to 50% is reasonable, especially if you are calling a lot. But that applies more to high stakes games. So at low stakes games, I think it's okay to have more bluffs, more value hands for now. So as we get more experience, we start adding in more 3-bet bluffs. So hopefully this number should increase to closer to 50% in the near future as we get more aggressive. So as for 4 to 5-bet, 23%, generally this number should also be 50% against decent players. But if your opponents are not 3-betting much as a bluff, then it really makes no sense to 4-bet something as a bluff, right? Because if the guy has a 3% 3-bet range,
Yeah.
then he will rarely have any bluffs, and yeah, you should not be bluffing basically. So I guess you are doing it in very highly specific situations where you think that guy is out of line, which I think is good for NL2. Okay, 5-bet 40%. Yeah, that's fine, I guess. It means you are rarely calling 4-bets, which is probably good for now because we don't want to get ourselves into tricky situations post-flop. So we will stick mostly with a 5-bet or 4 strategy when faced with a 4-bet for now. Okay, so you're still from the cutoff, 26. I think it's fine. 58 from the small blind. Yeah, that's good. I think the later we go, the wider we should steal. So even though we have absolute position post flop from the button, but I think it's still going to be more profitable to steal from the small blind, given that there is only one player left to act behind us. Okay, so cut off, I think for a beginner, 23 to 30% is reasonable. For the button, I think
50%, right?
I think 50% is a must in my opinion.
Yeah.
I guess 40 is fine as well, but yeah, 50% is like you cannot go wrong with it unless your opponent is just hyper aggressive and 3-betting you a lot. But that's not going to happen, I think. Small blind, 50% or more. Yeah, so I think it's good. Early position, 14% is fine. MP 15 is fine. Yeah, so I guess we did cover that in the previous video, right? So you are kind of following the open race charts, which is good. Flop C-bet 66.7%. So generally a good number is between 40 to 70%. The higher you go, the lower your flop C-bet should be. Because we want to be slow playing a lot. And our opponents are more aggressive, so they're going to be doing the betting themselves when checked to a lot of the time. But I think at lower limits, C-bet frequency closer to 70% makes more sense because they're more passive and they tend to fold too much, in my opinion, against C-bets. Especially guys who call very wide pre-flop but play very weakly post-flop. Like imagine someone with a 50% VPIP who's playing all sorts of trashy hands like 9-7 off. He's going to miss the flop most of the time. So unless he's not a complete donkey who just calls down with like 9 high, I think he's going to be forced to fold a lot. So a high flop c-bet strategy makes sense. So I think a lot of beginners, they learn from some strategy books that the c-bet, the flop c-bet is a very powerful weapon and stuff like that. You might have read that in some like Phil Hellmuth strategy book or something. So yes, it's good to c-bet a lot because people fold too much, but we should be more selective. So in certain instances, like for example, cases where our full equity will be reduced. Firstly, if there are more than one opponents in the pot, the likelihood of us getting an immediate fold on the flop is going to be much lower. Secondly, the board texture. If the board is coordinated and brings a lot of draws, then naturally our opponents will be less inclined to fold, which is why we should not fold as we should c-bet less often and only c-bet hands with potential to improve on future streets, so we can continue barreling. Okay, so the turn c-bet 50% I think is good. So generally 50% turn c-bet, 50% river c-bet is fine. If it's significantly lower than 45%, I think it's too little.
So what would that mean though if it's below 45%?
The guy is just not barreling enough.
Yeah.
So
you're running one street bluffs and giving up way too much, it suggests. Is that correct?
yeah, if the river c-bet is 40% for example, so can you think of how you would exploit that?
You would call two streets and then check.
Yeah, so you should be more inclined to float on the turn wider,
Yeah.
because knowing full well that you are going to be less likely to face a river bet, so you actually have more showdown value with your weaker hands.
Yeah.
At the same time, when your opponent fires your river, he is stronger than usual, so you should be less inclined to make hero calls with weak bluff catches.
what is too high a percentage for turn C bets and river C bets then?
So like the magic number is 50%, so plus minus
Okay.
5%. So anything less than 45 or more than 55 is probably like not ideal. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, next we have flop fold versus c-bet. So I think anywhere between 40 to 45% is good. So I think your number is a bit too high, but it's not a super huge league. I think if it's more than 50%, you might be folding too much. Okay, so on let's look at turn fold versus c-bet as well. So you have it at 37%. So I think this is a function of you folding too little on the flop, which means that you get to the turn with a weaker than average range. Oh no, stronger than average range. So yeah, when your range is a bit stronger than usual, you tend to have more hands which can call two barrels, right?
Yeah.
So my suggestion is to decrease the flop fold versus c-bet by a few percent and increase the turn fold versus c-bet by a few percent. Yeah, so once again, a good number for the turn fold versus c-bet is like about 40%, I think. River fold versus c-bet 52%. I think a good number is between like 45 to 50% again. So this, I guess, is a bit high, but I think it's fine, perfectly alright, because people at lower limits tend to triple barrel.
With the nuts. Yeah.
Yes, they tend to be stronger. So being a bit tighter in terms of calling down is definitely the right way to go. Okay, so a bit about the fold versus c-bet numbers. Do you have any idea why the numbers are like that?
No, not very sure.
Okay, so I've prepared a short word notepad document here. Okay, so let's say that the pot has $100 and our opponent is betting half pot here. So in this case, he is risking $50 to win the $100 in the pot. So we are attempting to find out here how often must his opponent fold, how often must hero fold in order for villain to have a profitable bluff. And what we mean by bluff here is that he will always lose when called and he will just give up. So he's not going to like barrel on future streets. We can even assume this is on the river. Yeah. So if hero folds, he's going to win $100 in the pot. If hero calls, we are just going to assume that the villain will lose $50. So how often must hero fold in order for a villain to have a profitable or break-even bluff? So we let X represent hero's folding frequency, and of course, if he calls or raises, that's 1 minus X. For now, we'll just assume he's calling. Yeah, so we want to solve for X. So the indifference point is when the amount he wins when he bluffs and we fold is equals to the amount he loses when we call or raise. So we write the equation out here. When we fold, folding frequency is X, right? It's times 100. And 50 is the amount he loses, and 1 minus X is when we continue against his bet. So solving for X, we get X as 1/3. So against a half pot bet, he needs hero to fold at least a third of the time in order to profit on a bluff. Okay, so the formula is just 50. A quick way to calculate it is just 50 divided by 50 plus 100 equals to 1/3. So against a half pot bet, he needs 1/3, 33% full equity, and
Villain needs 33% full equity.
yes, and consequently, we need to defend 2/3 of our range in order to not allow him a profitable bluff. So 1 minus 1/3 is 2/3.
So right now, because I'm folding 48.7%, I'm not defending wide enough,
Okay, so
right?
we are talking about half pot bet now.
Yeah.
So what is the average bet size that people tend to make on the flop?
60 to 70%.
Okay, so let's say it's a 2/3 pot size bet. So using the same formula,
Yeah.
0.66 divided by 1.66 equals to 40%.
So
So he would
40%.
need 40% full equity against a 2/3 pot size bet, and consequently we need to have a full versus C bet of around 40%
Yeah.
if he's using a 2/3 pot size bet on average. Obviously, this is an oversimplification, and this applies more on the river, but on the flop, there are future streets left to act. So we
Yeah.
need to take that into consideration. But this is a pretty good guideline. So this is why I said the fold to C bet on every street should be around 40 to 45%, assuming that the average bet size is between 60 to 85% of the pot. So yeah, these numbers do have some logical meaning behind them.
So they need us to fold 40% or more.
Yeah,
Here to.
because we are using the same formula here, right?
Yep.
50 divided by 50 times 100. So in this case, it's 66 divided by 66 plus 100. Yeah,
Yep.
we get 40% here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is the amount that hero needs to fold in order for villain to have a profitable bluff here.
Okay.
So if we want to defend um so-called optimally,
Yeah.
yeah, because if we are folding less than 40%, then our opponent, if he's a good player, he will not bluff as often. If we are folding too much, then he can just keep bluffing. He can see bet with a very high frequency.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this 40 to 45% is the so-called magic number.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But just to reiterate, I think it's okay to fold a bit more than this on the river and on the flop, and fold a bit less on the turn. That's like just how it works.
Yeah.
Okay, so next we have the raise C bet. 12%, I think is fine.
Okay. Not too high, not too low. I'm worried that I don't raise enough on the flop. Does this number
Okay,
suggest?
high stakes players tend to have a raise of under 10%, but I think I think having a higher raise frequency is better for low stakes, because at higher stakes you need to so-called balance your ranges at different points. But here, a lot of the time, if your opponent is just c betting 80%, 90%, you can just bluff raise a lot and force him off the hand, and they will not tend to fight back as often. So I like this number. Turn raise c bet 13.8%. Might be a bit high, but I don't think it's a big deal.
What's the acceptable range for flop raise C bet and turn raise C bet?
Maybe flop is probably 7 to 15, and it should be lower at higher stakes and higher at lower stakes. Turn raise, I think, is about 10%. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if you're bluff raising a lot. I don't think you are, right?
No, I only do it with.
Okay, so this might be a function of your tight pre-flop range. So you are flopping sets way more often than I would, because I'm playing a much wider range than you. Yeah. Okay, so maybe it really depends on your pre-flop ranges, I guess. River raise 7%. Yeah, I guess that's fine. Okay, so I think we are done with the basic stats review. So any comments?
So right now we've covered the how to review your own statistics. Next we'll cover the top 20 statistics for players in NL2.